you call up dispatch and say, I don't think I can make it. Well, you better make it. You better just go for it. Weather's bad. I don't feel comfortable. Everybody else is making it. How come you aren't? And it was really, it's always been, it's always been like that in trucking. Like, well, so and so can make it. How come you can't? And it's been there's good and bad to that, I guess, but there's not a lot of good really.
Trucking, big wheels there humming, high rate of fuel consumption, missing mama, needing loving, rolling with the weight of sound, running like a southern shaker. I don't need no 40 acres to turn this rig around.
Welcome back to Trucking Fitness Radio, the #1 driver's health and fitness podcast in the world. My name is Dr. Mark Manera. I'm the founder and CEO of the Trucking Fitness Company. I'm excited to have you listening to this episode. As you're aware, we are on a mission to make the trucking industry a healthier place, and this podcast is just one of the ways that we're doing that. So today, I'm really excited about this episode. We've got an awesome guest, one of my friends, David, who honestly has been here since the start of the Trucking Fitness Company and has really seen us progress. And on my end, I've seen kind of everything you're doing on your end, Dave, progress too. But before I introduce David, did you know you can become a guest on this podcast? We are having drivers come on who want one-on-one help from me or want to come on and tell their story of how they're living a healthy life on the road. So if you want to come on, have a platform to tell your story or to get personal help from me, we want to hear from you. Go to the link in our show notes or jump over to truckinfit.com/radio. So truckinfit.com/radio. It's also in the show notes, and fill out our show application. It literally takes 3 minutes. We want to hear from you, and we want you to have a little reward for being early to the podcast, because as we grow, it's going to be harder for you to get on the show. So go take advantage of that, and let's get on to the show. Today we are talking to David, a friend of mine, like I said, and a truck driver up in Canada who drives all over the United States too. And one of our biggest supporters since day one of kind of our mission. And he's got an amazing story, and I'm excited to hear more about it, because whenever I have a guest on who I know outside of here, I always get a nugget that I've never heard before. So I'm excited about that. And David, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark. Dr. Mark. When we first met, I couldn't call you Dr. Mark, I don't think,
No,
could I?
no, you could not. You don't have
Now,
to call me Dr. Mark. It's
should I call you what's up, Doc, or call you
yeah,
Doc?
there you go.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Kind of.
No.
Yeah. No, it's been really good to see what you've been doing, Mark. I've been invested in your vision from the beginning, personally, because what you're doing is so amazing. And I know with my co-host Bridget, we talked before, like, people talk about the younger generation, and here you are. You weren't even out of school, and you saw a need, and you're putting together a fitness program for truckers, and that's so commendable, and it's so amazing what you've been doing. It's really cool. So I've been following you, literally since when you started your app and the trucking fitness thing, and it's been a lot of fun, and I really, really applaud you for everything you're doing.
I really appreciate that. And yeah, I know. I remember I was on your episode, your podcast, probably 6 months ago. So I'm glad we finally were able to get you on ours. And I
You
think
you
that
you are officially getting older, because I looked it up last night, because I was talking to my mom last night, and I said I'm going to be on Mark Manera's podcast, and she's like, that name sounds familiar. And since she's my mom, she's obligated to watch and listen to
listen to a
my
podcast.
podcast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I looked back, because I said the same thing. I said it's probably about 6 months ago. So I looked back, February 16th, 2021.
Wow. A year
So
ago, almost a
exactly,
year to the date.
almost, yeah,
Oh,
almost
oh my
exactly a year
gosh.
to the day.
Oh,
So
geez. Do you see any gray in this hair? I'm time's flying, and I'm uh,
sorry, I'm derailing you.
no, no, not at all. Well, I like to start because I like to give everyone a little background on the people I have on as guests, and I think you have an amazing story. So, would you want to just start by kind of telling your background and the story of who Crazy Canuck Dave is?
Sure. Well, I'll try to give you the Google Notes version of this. I've had multiple head injuries. I was a very mediocre athlete in high school that always tried hard to be above average. I was okay, but definitely not blessed with tons of skills. I just had the heart, and that helped produce one of the first real injuries, head injuries that I got knocked out, and I in playing rugby, and that's where things kind of went from there. But the Crazy Canuck Dave, I've always, like I said, I've always played above my pay grade, and so I was living down in the States for a couple of years. My wife is American, and always a bit of a hard charger, and so they started calling me the Crazy Canuck after the Canadian Olympic ski team from the 1970s. It was Steve Podborski, Ken Reed, different guys like that. They were known as the Crazy Canucks because they just attack a downhill ski. I don't know, whatever they called it back then, whether it was giant slalom or not, I don't know, but they just attack a course. And I was apparently the same way when I was driving a truck. I would just go crazy. So they called me the Crazy Canuck because my CB handle at first was Canadian. Everybody called me Canadian. Nobody called me Dave or David or anything. And then when I came back up to Canada, um, 91, I had a pretty devastating head injury, and should have died. Should have died. My face got rearranged and have metal plates and plastic. Like my cheek is all metal plates, and my eye socket is plastic. Um, and I can still see out of both eyes. So that's been a miracle. And um, the 90s was pretty rough. Is kind of a blur because I had help for the back injury that came with it, and I had help for dust getting in my eye. They were concerned about stuff like that, but they weren't concerned about what was in here. And so all the doctors kind of say, like, yeah, we'll get your eye healed up, we'll get your back better, we'll do all these things, and they don't talk anything about the brain. And it's like, okay, well, I guess I am just crazy, because there's little things that were bothering me, and there's things that were affecting me, and I try to talk about it, and I didn't know what I was dealing with, and I figured, anybody with mental health issues just wasn't strong. They were just weak. That was that's how I grew up. I was a child of the 70s, and that's kind of how I grew up, like I always said, the uh, one place, you could get injured and not hurt you was getting a headshot. You don't want to break an arm when you're playing sports in high school, but get hit on the head, no big deal. It won't hurt that kid, right? Because they all think athletes are big, dumb, and tough, And 2001, I was involved in I was sleeping in my truck in a truck stop in Tallahassee. Had another truck run over the front of my truck, and the injuries weren't as devastating to my head. I flew from the sleeper up to the cab of the truck in a Western Star with the old style bunk, and of course clobbered my head on everything on the way past. Seems like bent the gear shift. apparently. Got up and, I was still thinking I'm pretty tough. And on the way to the airport a couple days later, as my truck was toast, I suffered my first panic attack. And I couldn't get out of that. And I was like, okay, this is weird. And this is, that was my eureka moment where I was, Dave, you have a problem. You have a problem. And no amount of me being strong, no amount of me toughing it out, no amount of me sucking it up, Buttercup, was working. And I started getting help, psychiatrists, psychologists, all kinds of stuff, started getting help and started improving, started working on things. I was off work for a number of years. Had another head injury, and I got back to work and got back to doing some crazy things, continued running my own trucking business, and drove up north on the ice roads, came back from the ice roads 2016 and was hauling a big piece of equipment on a trombone trailer, a trailer that splits out, and fell off there onto the back of my head. Of course, like I always seem to lead with my head, and then I was really, I was getting pretty suicidal. Not getting, I was, that summer was bad. It happened May 10th. And that summer was bad. And I ended up in a return to work program. It was a last ditch effort. The words from my insurance lady was either we'll get you graduated from this course or you will not graduate. Either way, you're cut off from us. It was, there's reasons involved with that, mainly because the company I was working for at the time was pretty small. And there's different levels of workers' compensation that comes to people depending on the size of the organization. And met a lady there that was the education person, because it was a mind, body, soul rehab. So we did pool work, we did athletic therapy, we did we had everybody available to us. Psychologist, we had education, and the lady from education, Sylvia Marusik, came up to me and put her finger on my chest and said, David, you have a story you need to get out. You need to remember who you are. And who I had been traditionally was somebody that liked helping those that are down, that gave me purpose in my life. Bullied as a kid, all that stuff. But I like to help others and lift them up. I never liked tearing people down, even though I didn't always understand how to do that. But that made a huge difference in my return to work program. It was supposed to be 8 weeks long. I met her 2 or 3 weeks in, and nobody gave me a chance of surviving that course. That's how bad off I was. Nobody said, David will be fine. He'll make it through. And I ended up being in there for 15 weeks and started trying to help other patients. And because of all the rehab I'd been through in my life, I had a little bit more knowledge than the average person. And because I've been working through mental issues for 15 years already, since 2001, it started working, and it made a big difference in my life. It was like a light switch almost, to help others. And so I'm still always in contact with Sylvia Marusik. She's an OT, and I told her right from the beginning, I said, if you're serious about this, that means that I'm going to call you when I need help with something. And she's like, oh yeah. And she does. And she's been very good that way, and so I started speaking out about mental health. I made a program for trucking companies called How to Survive to Drive, and I go through the uh, process that I've learned for myself is important and is the key. And somewhere along that way, then Mark and we ran into some mutual friends, and they put us in contact with each other. And so this has been the trucking fitness company. I should clarify, I'm invested, not money wise or anything else, but I'm in my heart is invested in your company, and I've wanted to see it succeed right from the beginning because you have a heart to work with others, and it's been a lot of fun to see how you grow. And so I just keep. I'm still a full time truck driver. I've managed to come back twice. I've been told I'll never work again, like two different times in my life, not just twice, but often. I've been told often, you'll never work again. Doctors and everybody has said you'll never work again. And I'm back working. I have been working full time since 2017 again, and still beating up and down the highway, and then doing my podcast and everything else whenever I have time, and trying to advocate for other people.
Mm. Dave, that's an amazing story, and I appreciate you opening up and telling that. And I think there were a couple details, like I said in the beginning. I've heard you tell your story before, but I guess I didn't pick up on a couple of those. And I guess kind of going back to that first panic attack, because I feel like, and I probably classify myself in this category too, but I feel like a lot of drivers have that, like, pull your boots up, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, you can get through anything. What was that experience like? And then, fighting through some of those emotions, and then, like, after that, were the panic attacks pretty frequent, or was it a one-off thing and then things just kind of kept moving? Walk me through that time period.
I wish it was a one-off thing, because panic attacks are not fun.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, in trucking, we're very male, have traditionally been very male dominated. And I started driving a truck almost exactly 34 years ago is when I got my first commercial license, was in the winter of 1988. And it every time we had something come up, you were expected to solve the problem. You're expected to just get up and go. And we used to, there has been the joke that is kind of reality in trucking, is that you put on a cowboy hat and a pair of boots and get at her, and no no fooling around. Like, you call up dispatch and say, I don't think I can make it. Well, you better make it. You better just go for it. Weather's bad. I don't feel comfortable. Everybody else is making it. How come you aren't? And it was really, it's always been, it's always been like that in trucking. Like, well, so and so can make it. How come you can't? And it's been there's good and bad to that, I guess, but there's not a lot of good, really, because you're in the older days, if you had people that could, typically truck drivers were from a farm background or from a trucking background of some kind. I came from a farm background there, or a country boy background. You know, um, we had a lot of skills already, and we could deal with a lot of things. But as the trucking industry grows and people get away from farms, and not as many people know trucking, then we're getting a lot more different people in that don't have a good background, and they've been getting pushed to do things that's like, why are you doing this? And causing problems. And No, been the whole mentality of trucking is just suck it up, Buttercup. And I really think that women coming into the industry have made the biggest difference in my career because they've come in and you can't push a woman like you can with a man because we're wired a little bit differently. You can say to a guy, suck it up, Buttercup, and just go for it. And they will try because we have an ego, we have testosterone, we want to prove we are the man, you know. I don't have any mental issues, I don't have any problems, I'm the man, you know. It's a little tough to say that to a woman, you know, and not and it's been great because they've been pushing back at companies, you know, simple things like the way, you know, that's exactly it with dispatch, you know, forcing drivers to do things. Women will just say, I'm not putting up with that. And we should have learned that from women decades ago, right? We should have learned that. We should have been smarter. And women have been teaching us that. And women have helped teach us that it's okay to stop and say, you know, I'm not doing that. Or I don't feel comfortable with that. It's not an easy line to walk always, right, Mark? You know, but we have to do what works for everybody. And the mental health aspect is something that is still tough to get through with some companies. You know, you can't use and abuse your drivers mentally and expect them to be happy employees. And there's a reason. As you've pointed out, what was the need that you saw? Drivers are dying 16 years earlier.
Yeah.
Is that the number you
Yeah.
use, Mark?
Yeah, their life expectancy is 16 years less than the average population. Yeah.
Yeah. There's because we've taken that attitude from companies and figure we just need to do what we need to do to get the job done. And we've sacrificed our mental health, we've sacrificed our physical health, we've sacrificed everything to do this job, which is ridiculous. And we need people like you coming in and saying, stop, do your exercise. That 20 minutes, half an hour you do today will make a difference for you down the road.
100%. 100%. I completely agree. And I think, I think that even goes in, everything that you were saying about, companies or just the industry as a whole, pushing people to, well, you can push through or you can do this is it kind of runs one in one with the whole identity of, making drivers feel like they're just a number and not feeling like a person. And if the industry or certain companies actually treated their drivers like a person, they would realize everyone has different needs, everyone has different struggles, and I think from the medical background, I think, and I can take a step back and I can maybe not relate, but I can understand where if someone who hasn't had a mental health problem struggles to understand it initially because of it's not like a broken arm where you see that and it's like, well, that's broken right there. It's a lot more difficult, and I think the industry is moving more towards that and realizing that hey, there's some reason why we're having a tough time getting the next generation into this industry because the way we're treating our drivers currently, and so I think I appreciate you opening up, and I think kind of one last question I'd love to ask you is just like if you had one or multiple pieces of advice for a driver struggling on the road with their mental health, what would you advise them?
Uh, for one thing, you're not the only one, and that seems to be a recurring theme when I talk to people. Is that especially when it comes to certain things, you know, like if you go in a grocery store and you can't decide between Skippy creamy peanut butter and Skippy crunchy peanut butter, and that's giving you a panic attack, you're not the only one that's been there before. And when you try to talk to people that don't have this issue, they're like, "You're weird, you're crazy," and they say things like that. And so there's little things that can affect us mentally going down the road that if you talk to many people, they dismiss that. They say, "You're crazy." And you start to think that, you start to buy into that. And so what I want people to understand is that that is something that happens, that is normal, um that is not unusual. And whatever mental issues you're going through, you're not the only one that's ever been there. And take comfort in that, for one. And when you realize that you aren't the only one, then start working to find ways to mitigate those issues. I always say this: no matter what issues you have, um, whether it's physical, mental, but I talk mainly about mental issues. If you have different things that are considered a disability by other people, you flip that around and you use that as your ability. I always love to talk about my grandson who's got cerebral palsy. And when he was younger, and he still calls it this today, he calls it his super palsy because
Love it.
he can do things that doctors say he shouldn't be able to do because he has cerebral palsy. So, we got to kind of, no, if you're on the road and you're one that has, I'll use an example here. I can't stand being late. I can't stand it when things aren't working properly myself. And so that can freak me out. And that can cause me problems. Or I can say, okay, I need to order my day better so that I'm more prepared for things happening. And I look at what's going on and I plan my day so that, I show up or I do things ahead of schedule. And that relieves most of the anxiety that I have and most of the issues that I have. And because I've been paying attention to that, guess what? The customer is happier because here I am on time or ahead of time, or I've made sure that I have stuff looked after. Instead of just saying, instead of just giving in to this so called disability, use it for my ability. Everything we have, Mark, can be used to our advantage in life. That's the way I work with things. I've been told I'd never work again, and I've had to modify how I operate. I've had to modify who I am in different ways, and I'm still a contributing member of society today. I don't like the idea of rolling over and saying, okay, well, I am what I am. It is what it is. You know, I don't like that. No, just take what you have and use it and move forward.
Yeah, and David, I'd say you're a little above just a a member of society. I think you've helped a lot of people, including myself, have a better understanding of mental health and a better understanding of, the struggles people go through that you never even know because they're keeping it internal. And, I
Yep.
think two things off of what you just said there. Number one, you mentioned it before, you mentioned a couple of times, there's a lot of messed up things about our medical system and our healthcare system. And I think that, especially one of the things that gets under my skin as a physical therapist and as just a healthcare provider is when people, clinicians and doctors make these blanket statements of, you're never going to do X or you're never going to Y. And,
Yeah.
I think that is a moment where the doctor or medical professional has this authority position over you, and they're this all-knowing person in their expertise. And I think that causes more problems to people who just say, they crumble and say, oh, I'm never going to be able to do that, especially like maybe it's something I love doing or it was my favorite hobby to do. Well, I'm never going to be able to do that. Man, that sucks. And I
Yeah.
think you're a living example of, yeah, I think there are times in a medical condition where things have to be restricted or um, you do have to have a realization of maybe life's going to be a little bit different. But having this black or white mentality of you can never do this or you can never do that, I think does more harm than ever. And I think you as a person have the authority and the ability to push yourself further than any medical professional would ever be able to do. So I
Yeah.
just leave the people listening with that. And then, the second thing that you mentioned, or the second thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was, the people who are listening to this, who maybe have never struggled with mental health before. And and are kind of like, I understand, I know people deal with it. I personally maybe haven't dealt with it to the extremes of some other people. And it's kind of, for maybe someone listening, it's kind of one of those, well, how am I supposed to help someone if I think they're dealing with depression or anxiety? And, I think number one, if someone's in a really, you know, poor mental state, don't get yourself in a position that get them help. There's resources. If you go online, you can find resources for people. But for the 95% of people who are just struggling day to day, maybe they had a rough day, maybe they're in a bad season of life where they're just having some depression, just showing up and having a conversation with them can be night and day.
Be
You don't
kind.
need to be kind. You don't need to know the answers. You just need to be interested and curious.
Mm-hmm.
And if you
Exactly.
just show up and listen, ask questions, you can go in just being dumb and just like not you don't have to know the answers. You can ask what's going on or just ask for questions and ask for clarity. People are not going to be mad that you're asking them questions. That's what they want. They want to be heard. A lot of people don't feel heard. And so if you know someone who's struggling with anxiety or depression, just have a conversation with them. Just tell them that you're there for them and you're open to hear what's going on. You're open to giving advice if that's what they want, and just hearing a different perspective. And I think you know there's a lot of good that can come from you just starting that conversation and kind of putting your hand out and being like, hey, I'm there for you. um
Yeah.
so I think that's a great way to end it. But before we do you have any other piece of advice or anything else that I just said that kind of sparked anything that you wanted to talk about before we end the podcast?
You summed it up very well there. Be kind and listen. Most people have the answers inside them, and if you listen, they're people aren't always looking for advice. We often know what the answer is. We just want to talk about it, blow off that steam, and just listen, and they will go on with their life and be much better. And they may credit you for all kinds of stuff, because you are such an amazing person, and all you did was sit and listen.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think something, David, you and I share is our background, our faith, and our background, and belief in God. And sometimes when I'm going into a tough conversation, I just before I say anything, just like, hey, give me the right words, and it all
Yeah.
ends up working out. And I think even if you're not a spiritual person, going in with that mentality of just, hey, I'm here to help, and I'm interested and curious about, wanting to be there for you. Things work out, and it's never gonna, you're not gonna say the wrong thing, and even if you do, they're not going to care because they know the intention is right. So yeah, David, if people want to hear more about your podcast, tell them where they can find everything. I know you do a lot of interviews with other drivers or people in the industry, specifically with mental health. So please tell everyone where they can find you.
Crazy Canuck Truckin podcast. I'm on YouTube, Spotify, um, Apple, just about everywhere you can find a podcast. I'm on there. If you look at my name in the bottom corner of this, it says Crazy Canuck. So if you wonder how to spell the name, that's how you spell Canuck. And then Truckin has no G on the end. And I put everything up on all the as many different platforms. Same with Twitter. I'm on Twitter. His personal account is Crazy Canuck Dave, but there's also Crazy Canuck Truckin there. Same with Instagram. On Instagram, Crazy Canuck Truckin. My personal account there is Survive to Drive. But just about anywhere you search Crazy Canuck Dave, and you'll find stuff on my podcast. And I just try to do as much as I can to help other people realize that they're not alone and that there is help. And like you said, just because a doctor tells you you are going to be like this for the rest of your life, you don't need to accept that. And you can unlock the potential in your body far more than that's the intangible that doctors can't tap into. You have to tap into it yourself, is your own potential. They may be able to see it and think that, okay, if you push harder, you can get there. And so it's within you, and unlock it and go for it.
Awesome. Awesome. Dave, I really appreciate you coming on, and what an amazing episode and what an amazing conversation. Again, if this podcast inspired you to, come on and tell your story, or you're just wanting specific help with your health and fitness on the road, go to the link in our show notes. You can go apply to be on the show. And for everyone listening, drive safe today, and we'll see you next time.